双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
A Smaller History of Greece by William Smith. Contents. Chapter I. Geography of Greece. Chapter 2. Origin of the Greeks and the Heroic Age. Chapter 3. General Survey of the Greek People. National Institutions. Chapter 4. Early History of Peloponnesus and Sparta II. The End of the Messenian Wars. BC 668. Chapter V. Early History of Athens down to the Establishment of Democracy by Clisthenes. BC 510. Chapter 6. The Greek Colonies. Chapter 7. The Persian Wars, from the Ionic Revolt to the Battle of Marathon, BC 500 to 490. Chapter 8. The Persian Wars, the Battles of Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea, BC 480 to 479. Chapter 9. From the end of the Persian Wars to the beginning of the Peloponnesian War, BC 479 to 431. Chapter X. Athens in the time of Pericles. Chapter 11. The Peloponnesian War, first period, from the commencement of the war to the Peace of Nicias, BC 431 to 421. Chapter 12. The Peloponnesian War, second period, from the Peace of Nicias to the defeat of the Athenians in Sicily, BC 421 to 413. Chapter 13. The Peloponnesian War, third period, from the Sicilian expedition to the end of the war, BC 413 to 404. Chapter 14. The Theory Tyrants and the Death of Socrates, BC 404 to 399. Chapter 15. The Expedition of the Greeks under Cyrus and Retreat of the 10,000, BC 401 to 400. Chapter 16. The Supremacy of Sparta, BC 404 to 371. Chapter 17. The Supremacy of Thebes, BC 371 to 361. Chapter 18. History of the Sicilian Greeks, from the destruction of the Athenian armament to the death of Timoleon. Chapter 19. Philip of Macedon, BC 359 to 336. Chapter XX. Alexander the Great, BC 336 to 323. Chapter 21. From the death of Alexander the Great to the conquest of Greece by the Romans, BC 323 to 146. Chapter 22. Sketch of the history of Greek literature, from the earliest times to the reign of Alexander the Great. Chapter 1. Geography of Greece. Greece is the southern portion of a great peninsula of Europe, washed on three sides by the Mediterranean Sea. It is bounded on the north by the Cambunian Mountains, which separate it from Macedonia. It extends from the 40th degree of latitude to the 36th, its greatest length being not more than 250 English miles, and its greatest breadth only 180. Its surface is considerably less than that of Portugal. This small area was divided among a number of independent states, many of them containing a territory of only a few square miles, and none of them larger than an English county. But the heroism and genius of the Greeks have given an interest to the insignificant spot of earth bearing their name, which the vastest empires have never equaled. The name of Greece was not used by the inhabitants of the country. They called their land Hellas, and themselves Hellenes. At first the word Hellas signified only a small district in Thessaly, from which the Hellenes gradually spread over the whole country. The names of Greece and Greeks come to us from the Romans, who gave the name of Gracia to the country and of Greci to the inhabitants. The two northerly provinces of Greece are Thessaly and Epirus, separated from each other by Mount Pindus. Thessaly is a fertile plain enclosed by lofty mountains, and drained by the river Peneus, which finds its way into the sea through the celebrated Vale of Tempe. Epirus is covered by rugged ranges of mountains running from north to south, through which the Achelous, the largest river of Greece, flows towards the Corinthian Gulf. In entering central Greece from Thessaly, the road runs along the coast through the narrow pass of Thermopylae, between the sea and a lofty range of mountains. The district along the coast was inhabited by the eastern Locrians, while to their west were Doris and Phocis, the greater part of the latter being occupied by Mount Parnassus, the abode of the Muses, upon the slopes of which lay the town of Delphi, with its celebrated oracle of Apollo. South of Phocis is Boeotia, which is a large hollow basin, enclosed on every side by mountains, which prevent the waters from flowing into the sea. Hence the atmosphere was damp and thick, to which circumstance the witty Athenians attributed the dullness of the inhabitants. Thebes was the chief city of Boeotia. South of Boeotia lies Attica, which is in the form of a triangle, having two of its sides washed by the sea and its base united to the land. Its soil is light and dry and is better adapted for the growth of fruit than of corn. It was particularly celebrated for its olives, which were regarded as the gift of Athena, Minerva, and were always under the care of that goddess. Athens was on the western coast, between 4 and 5 miles from its port. Piraeus, west of Attica, towards the isthmus, is the small district of Megaris. The western half of central Greece consists of western Locris, Aetolia, and Acarnania. These districts were less civilized than the other countries of Greece, and were the haunts of rude robber tribes even as late as the Peloponnesian War. Central Greece is connected with the southern peninsula by a narrow isthmus, on which stood the city of Corinth. So narrow is this isthmus that the ancients regarded the peninsula as an island, and gave to it the name of Peloponnesus, or the island of Pelops, from the mythical hero of this name. Its modern name, the Morea, was bestowed upon it from its resemblance to the leaf of the mulberry. The mountains of Peloponnesus have their roots in the center of the country, from which they branch out towards the sea. This central region, called Arcadia, is the Switzerland of the peninsula. It is surrounded by a ring of mountains, forming a kind of natural wall, which separates it from the remaining Peloponnesian states. The other chief divisions of Peloponnesus were Achaia, Argolis, Laconia, Messenia, and Elis. Achaia is a narrow slip of country lying between the northern barrier of Arcadia and the Corinthian Gulf. Argolis, on the east, contained several independent states, of which the most important was Argos. Laconia and Messenia occupied the whole of the south of the peninsula from sea to sea. These two countries were separated by the lofty range of Taygetus, running from north to south, and terminating in the promontory of Taenarum, now Cape Matapan, the southernmost point of Greece and Europe. Sparta, the chief town of Laconia, stood in the valley of the Eurotas, which opens out into a plain of considerable extent towards the Laconian Gulf. Messenia, in like manner, was drained by the Pamesus, whose plain is still more extensive and fertile than that of the Eurotas. Elis, on the west of Arcadia, contains the memorable plain of Olympia, through which the Alpheus flows, and in which the city of Pisa stood. Of the numerous islands which line the Grecian shores, the most important was Euboea, stretching along the coasts of Boeotia and Attica. South of Euboea was the group of islands called the Cyclades, lying around Delos as a center, and east of these were the Sporades, near the Asiatic coast. South of these groups are the large islands of Crete and Rhodes. The physical features of the country exercised an important influence upon the political destinies of the people. Greece is one of the most mountainous countries of Europe. Its surface is occupied by a number of small plains, either entirely surrounded by limestone mountains or open only to the sea. Each of the principal Grecian cities was founded in one of these small plains, and, as the mountains which separated it from its neighbors were lofty and rugged, each city grew up in solitary independence. But at the same time it had ready and easy access to the sea, and Arcadia was almost the only political division that did not possess some territory upon the coast. Thus shut out from their neighbors by mountains, the Greeks were naturally attracted to the sea, and became a maritime people. Hence they possessed the love of freedom and the spirit of adventure, which have always characterized, more or less, the inhabitants of maritime districts. Chapter 2. Origin of the Greeks and the Heroic Age. No nation possesses a history till events are recorded in written documents, and it was not till the epoch known by the name of the First Olympiad, corresponding to the year 776 BC, that the Greeks began to employ writing as a means for perpetuating the memory of any historical facts. Before that period, everything is vague and uncertain, and the exploits of the heroes related by the poets must not be regarded as historical facts. The Pelasgians are universally represented as the most ancient inhabitants of Greece. They were spread over the Italian as well as the Grecian peninsula, and the Pelasgic language thus formed the basis of the Latin as well as of the Greek. They were divided into several tribes, of which the Hellenes were probably one. At any rate, this people, who originally dwelt in the south of Thessaly, gradually spread over the rest of Greece. The Pelasgians disappeared before them, or were incorporated with them, and their dialect became the language of Greece. The Hellenes considered themselves the descendants of one common ancestor, Hellen, the son of Deucalion and Pyrrha. To Hellen were ascribed 3 sons, Dorus, Xuthus, and Aeolus. Of these, Dorus and Aeolus gave their names to the Dorians and Aeolianus, and Xuthus, through his 2 sons Ion and Achaeus, became the forefather of the Ionians and Achaeans. Thus the Greeks accounted for the origin of the 4 great divisions of their race. The descent of the Hellenes from a common ancestor, Hellen, was a fundamental article in the popular faith. It was a general practice in antiquity to invent fictitious persons for the purpose of explaining names of which the origin was buried in obscurity. It was in this way that Hellen and his sons came into being, but though they never had any real existence, the tales about them may be regarded as the traditional history of the races to whom they gave their names. The civilization of the Greeks and the development of their language bear all the marks of home growth, and probably were little affected by foreign influence. The traditions, however, of the Greeks would point to a contrary conclusion. It was a general belief among them that the Pelasgians were reclaimed from barbarism by Oriental strangers, who settled in the country and introduced among the rude inhabitants the first elements of civilization. Attica is said to have been indebted for the arts of civilized life to Cecrops, a native of Sais in Egypt. To him is ascribed the foundation of the city of Athens, the institution of marriage, and the introduction of religious rites and ceremonies. Argos, in like manner, is said to have been founded by the Egyptian Danaus, who fled to Greece with his 50 daughters, to escape from the persecution of their suitors, the 50 sons of his brother Aegyptus. The Egyptian stranger was elected king by the natives, and from him the tribe of the Danai derived their name, which Homer frequently uses as a general appellation for the Greeks. Another colony was the one led from Asia by Pelops, from whom the southern peninsula of Greece derived its name of Peloponnesus. Pelops is represented as a Phrygian, and the son of the wealthy king Tantalus. He became king of Mycenae, and the founder of a powerful dynasty, one of the most renowned in the heroic age of Greece. From him was descended Agamemnon, who led the Grecian host against Troy. The tale of the Phoenician colony, conducted by Cadmus, and which founded Thebes in Boeotia, rests upon a different basis. Whether there was such a person as the Phoenician Cadmus, and whether he built the town called Cadmea, which afterwards became the citadel of Thebes, as the ancient legends relate, cannot be determined. But it is certain that the Greeks were indebted to the Phoenicians for the art of writing, for both the names and the forms of the letters in the Greek alphabet are evidently derived from the Phoenician. With this exception, the Oriental strangers left no permanent traces of their settlements in Greece, and the population of the country continued to be essentially Grecian. uncontaminated by any foreign elements. The Age of the Heroes. From the first appearance of the Hellenes in Thessaly to the return of the Greeks from Troy, was supposed to be a period of about 200 years. These heroes were believed to be a noble race of beings, possessing a superhuman, though not a divine nature, and superior to ordinary men in strength of body and greatness of soul. Among the heroes, 3 stand conspicuously forth. Hercules, the national hero of Greece; Theseus, the hero of Attica; and Minos, king of Crete, the principal founder of Grecian law and civilization. Hercules was the son of Zeus, Jupiter, and Alcmena, but the jealous anger of Hera, Juno, raised up against him an opponent and a master in the person of Eurystheus, at whose bidding the greatest of all heroes was to achieve those wonderful labors which filled the whole world with his fame. In these are realized, on a magnificent scale, the 2 great objects of ancient heroism: the destruction of physical and moral evil, and the acquisition of wealth and power. Such, for instance, are the labors in which he destroys the terrible Nemean lion and Lernaean hydra, carries off the girdle of Ares from Hippolyte, queen of the Amazons, and seizes the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a 100-headed dragon. Theseus was a son of Aegeus, king of Athens, and of Aethra, daughter of Pythius, king of Treason. Among his many memorable achievements, the most famous was his deliverance of Athens from the frightful tribute imposed upon it by Minos for the murder of his son. This consisted of 7 youths and 7 maidens whom the Athenians were compelled to send every 9 years to Crete, there to be devoured by the Minotaur, a monster with a human body and a bull's head, which Minos kept concealed in an inextricable labyrinth. The 3rd ship was already on the point of sailing with its cargo of innocent victims, when Theseus offered to go with them, hoping to put an end forever to the horrible tribute. Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, became enamored of the hero, and having supplied him with a clue to trace the windings of the labyrinth, Theseus succeeded in killing the monster, and in tracking his way out of the mazy lair. Theseus, on his return, became king of Attica, and proceeded to lay the foundations of the future greatness of the country. He united into one political body the 12 independent states into which Cecrops had divided Attica, and made Athens the capital of the new kingdom. He then divided the citizens into 3 classes, namely, Eupatridae, or nobles; Geomori, or husbandmen; and Demiurgi, or artisans. Minos, king of Crete, whose history is connected with that of Theseus, appears, like him, the representative of an historical and civil state of life. Minos is said to have received the laws of Crete immediately from Zeus, and traditions uniformly present him as king of the sea. Possessing a numerous fleet, he reduced the surrounding islands, especially the Cyclades, under his dominion, and cleared the sea of pirates. The voyage of the Argonauts and the Trojan War were the most memorable enterprises undertaken by collective bodies of heroes. The Argonauts derived their name from the Argo, a ship built for the adventurers by Jason, under the superintendence of Athena Minerva. They embarked in the harbor of Iolcus in Thessaly for the purpose of obtaining the Golden Fleece, which was preserved in Aea and Chalcis, on the eastern shores of the Black Sea, under the guardianship of a sleepless dragon. The most renowned heroes of the age took part in the expedition. Among them were Hercules and Theseus, as well as the principal leaders in the Trojan War. But Jason is the central figure and the real hero of the enterprise. Upon arriving at Aea, after many adventures, King Aetes promised to deliver to Jason the Golden Fleece, provided he yoked 2 fire-breathing oxen with brazen feet and performed other wonderful deeds. Here, also, as in the legend of Theseus, love played a prominent part. Medea, the daughter of Aetes, who was skilled in magic and supernatural arts, furnished Jason with the means of accomplishing the labors imposed upon him, and as her father still delayed to surrender the fleece, She cast the dragon asleep during the night, seized the fleece, and sailed away in the Argo with her beloved Jason. The Trojan War was the greatest of all the heroic achievements. It formed the subject of innumerable epic poems, and has been immortalized by the genius of Homer. Paris, son of Priam, king of Troy, abused the hospitality of Menelaus, king of Sparta, by carrying off his wife Helen, the most beautiful woman of the age. All the Grecian princes looked upon the outrage as one committed against themselves. Responding to the call of Menelaus, they assembled in arms, elected his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, leader of the expedition, and sailed across the Aegean in nearly 1,200 ships to recover the faithless fair one. Several of the Confederate heroes excelled Agamemnon in fame. Among them, Achilles, chief of the Thessalian Myrmidons, stood preeminent in strength, beauty, and valor, whilst Ulysses, king of Ithaca, surpassed all the rest in the mental qualities of counsel and eloquence. Among the Trojans, Hector, one of the sons of Priam, was most distinguished for heroic qualities and formed a striking contrast to his handsome but effeminate brother Paris. Next to Hector in valor stood Aeneas, son of Anchises and Aphrodite, Venus. Even the gods took part in the contest, encouraging their favorite heroes, and sometimes fighting by their side or in their stead. It was not till the 10th year of the war that Troy yielded to the inevitable decree of fate, and it is this year which forms the subject of the Iliad. Achilles, offended by Agamemnon, abstains from the war, and in his absence the Greeks are no match for Hector. The Trojans drive them back into their camp, and are already setting fire to their ships, when Achilles gives his armor to his friend Patroclus, and allows him to charge at the head of the Myrmidons. Patroclus repulses the Trojans from the ships, but the god Apollo is against him, and he falls under the spear of Hector. Desire to avenge the death of his friend proves more powerful in the breast of Achilles than anger against Agamemnon. He appears again in the field in new and gorgeous armor, forged for him by the god Hephaestus, Vulcan, at the prayer of Thetis. The Trojans fly before him, and, although Achilles is aware that his own death must speedily follow that of the Trojan hero, he slays Hector in single combat. The Iliad closes with the burial of Hector. The death of Achilles and the capture of Troy were related in later poems. The hero of so many achievements perishes by an arrow shot by the unwarlike Paris, but directed by the hand of Apollo. The noblest combatants had now fallen on either side, and force of arms had proved unable to accomplish what stratagem at length effects. It is Ulysses who now steps into the foreground and becomes the real conqueror of Troy. By his advice, a wooden horse is built, in whose inside he and other heroes conceal themselves. The infatuated Trojans admit the horse within their walls. In the dead of night, the Greeks rush out and open the gates to their comrades. Troy is delivered over to the sword, and its glory sinks in ashes. The fall of Troy is placed in the year 1184 BC. The return of the Grecian leaders from Troy forms another series of poetical legends. Several meet with tragical ends. Agamemnon is murdered on his arrival at Mycenae by his wife Clytemnestra and her paramour Aegisthus. But of these wanderings, the most celebrated and interesting are those of Ulysses, which form the subject of the Odyssey. After 20 years' absence, he arrives at length in Ithaca, where he slays the numerous suitors who devoured his substance and contended for the hand of his wife Penelope. The Homeric poems must not be regarded as a record of historical persons and events, but, at the same time, they present a valuable picture of the institutions and manners of the earliest known state of Grecian society. In the heroic age, Greece was already divided into a number of independent states, each governed by its own king. The authority of the king was not limited by any laws. His power resembled that of the patriarchs in the Old Testament, and for the exercise of it he was responsible only to Zeus, and not to his people. But though the king was not restrained in the exercise of his power by any positive laws, his authority was practically limited by the bull, or Council of Chiefs, and the Agora, or General Assembly of Freemen. These two bodies, of little account in the heroic age, became in the Republican age the sole depositories of political power. The Greeks in the heroic age were divided into the three classes of nobles: common freemen and slaves. The nobles were raised far above the rest of the community in honor, power,